Hello and welcome to Coffee and Conversation here on BTCN. I'm your host, Shashank Bengali. I'm here with Nasir Zubairi. He's the CEO of the Luxembourg House of Financial Technology. Nasir, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And so tell us what brings you to the Singapore Fintech Festival.
Well, Singapore Fintech Festival has very fast become the event in the fintech calendar, if not the financial services calendar in the year. It's where all the movers and shakers are. So for us, it's really about enhancing, first and foremost, the Luxembourg brand and awareness of the size, scale, and opportunity of the financial services sector there, and the opportunity, therefore, of fintech.
That's great. So tell us about your work at LHoFT. Obviously, Luxembourg has a reputation as being a financial services hub for Europe and really for the wider world. What role has LHoFT played in kind of enhancing that reputation and that core business of the country?
Given the size of the financial services sector, and now essentially it becoming the number one EU centre after the UK finally decides whether it's in or, well, probably out, there wasn't anything really happening in fintech to support the industry. You could probably count on one or two hands how many firms were actually trying to push forward the digital agenda. So the government felt that there was a need to bring a driving force to that ecosystem, and that's where the concept of the LHoFT was born. And the real idea with the LHoFT is to really bring together the public sector, the private sector, the technology firms, the regulator, the advisory firms, basically the entirety of the ecosystem, gel that ecosystem together in order to help find solutions and drive the digital agenda forward. We obviously then look, as we are here, to then connect that ecosystem internationally. One of the other key pillars we focus on is education and knowledge enhancement, so that people have the latest tools, understand the latest trends, so that they're aware of what solutions are available in the market. And then critically, there are areas where fintech, startup firms, banks themselves are not really pushing the boat, but are clearly a problem for the industry, where arguably there isn't a sort of startup kind of solution because the unit economics don't necessarily make sense. What I'm talking about here is utilities, right? And there we've been given the remit to really try and drive forward and bring together stakeholders to build sort of large-scale utilities that solve mutual problems for the industry.
Right, and so when you talk about setting up this ecosystem, you're not really recruiting firms from all different kinds of industries. You're being quite targeted about what Luxembourg's core capabilities are and how firms can come in and kind of add to that.
Absolutely. I mean, strategically for us, that just made sense, is that first we needed to catalyze the ecosystem. And the easiest way to catalyze that ecosystem is not try and convince people to set up new fintech firms. There is a risk. People quitting their jobs from the finance industry is not a simple thing to do. So the first step was really, what solution providers are there internationally that we know that are successful, that could target and leverage the opportunities in Luxembourg. And once we see those coming into Luxembourg, that kind of then gives a spark to everyone else to then also want to get more and more involved, right? I mean, we're always going to have limited potential in terms of a domestic market. It's 600,000 people. But what we're doing is Luxembourg is doing what it's always done fantastically well, is be a home for businesses that want to target the European Union, and even more so globally with our particularly close relationships with China, Japan. I mean, the traditional finance sector is an international finance sector. And when you look at the EU, there are not many of those in reality. It is literally Ireland, Luxembourg, and London that service an international community. Paris, Frankfurt, Amsterdam are domestic markets, and you need a support base around that. It helps also, clearly, as you can tell, I am not a Luxembourger, I'm British. I don't speak a word of French or German, nor do I need to. Everything in Luxembourg can be done in English, which when you're looking at firms from the US, from Asia, Middle East, Africa, they don't speak French, German, Italian, Flemish, or any other European language. You need English.
And talk a bit more then about the ecosystem. What firms, what are the Highflyers that have cropped up in Luxembourg in this sector that you guys have helped to support?
Well, what's been really interesting is looking at from when we set up the LHoFT, which is only 2 years ago, to today. which is aligned to some degree with the very rapid hype cycle around blockchain and crypto assets, cryptocurrencies. We were the first EU jurisdiction to license 2 of the big crypto exchanges, be it using payments institution licenses, Bitflyer and Bitstamp. We then sort of saw this massive flood of crypto firms wanting to come in, and we had a little push back on that a little bit. But now suddenly we've seen this real legitimacy around the use of blockchain. To sort of summarize it broadly, it's firms that are using blockchain to lower costs, increase efficiency and speed, tokenizing traditional asset classes, and so issuing platforms essentially in sort of bonds, equities, and other assets. Then it's tokenization to provide broader access to new asset class or less liquid asset classes maybe, such as real estate, private equity. And then finally in the space of settlement or in subscription redemption of the fund management value chain and securities value chain. As we talked about, it's quite a fat value chain as it stands today. There are a lot of different players that support the fund management and securities industry. Over time, that will become leaner, but what we can do today is try and compress the costs and increase efficiency and speed within that value chain as it stands without neglecting the existing players. And so there, we're seeing a lot of traction in firms that are providing services there.
And with your approach, it seems like you're not chasing after the hype of the moment. Does that allow you with the technology like blockchain to kind of weather some of the headwinds in the media, some of the hype, some of the regulatory issues?
Yeah, I mean, to me, blockchain is a technology. You know, I find it interesting when I go in and speak to CEOs of banks, and they seem to know quite a bit about blockchain. And I ask them, do you know how HTTP works? Do you know how TCP/IP works, or how a text message goes from one phone to another? And of course they don't. And I say, why the hell do you know how blockchain works? It's a technology that enables a solution. What we try and do is focus on what are the problems, what are the opportunities, how that is solved, and yes, there is some nitty-gritty around that when it comes to implementation. But the reality here is what you're looking for in the B2B environment. What are banks looking for, financial institutions looking for? How they can make more money, save money, become more efficient, or comply with a legal requirement. That's it. So as long as you're targeted on that, there's legitimacy in the solutions provider. That's where we focus in order to move the sector forward.
So we're sitting here in Singapore.
Yes.
The similarities are striking. You've got a small country surrounded by much larger countries, a country focused on financial services and English speaking to attract foreign investors. Are there any lessons or similarities you see in Luxembourg when you look at Singapore and its approach to innovation, to regulation in this space?
Well, my team, one of my team members who's here with me today is sort of occasionally pulls up the fact that I jokingly said when I was hiring him that I'm going to make Luxembourg the Singapore of Europe, right? I mean, what we see here is firstly incredibly inspiring because Europe is not, and worryingly so, developing in terms of tech generally and fintech specifically, I think, as fast as Asia and likewise the US. Now, a lot of that comes down to the regulatory environment, which, I mean, although very sophisticated, does have its layers of bureaucracy because of the 28 nations having to agree on regulation and implement. So what we're seeing here is incredible agility. Now, Luxembourg does have that agility, but it's really about the speed at which we can innovate, develop, and implement solutions. These are the biggest learnings I have. I think bringing along the delegation we have, which includes banks, advisory firms, startups, it's the energy they're getting from here, which is inspiring them to go back and want to do even more. We leverage, obviously, by communicating back to the Luxembourg community everything we're doing here. We do podcasts, etc., to try and inspire them as well. And to show them that there's a massive legitimacy in this sector. I mean, 65,000 people. It is the biggest event I've ever attended in financial services, let alone fintech, and I've been to most in my career. So it's really the inspiration, the energy, seeing what new trends are available, network, new solutions. It's an incredibly valuable experience for us all.
Fantastic. Nasir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate it. I'm Shashank Meghali from BTCN. That's all the time we have. Please join us next time for Coffee and Conversation. We'll see you then.